Hi everyone, welcome back to Pages of the Globe. Today I'm going to be reading to you the short story, The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. Before we start, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the author and then we're going to jump straight into the story. Now, I have talked about Edgar Allan Poe a good amount of times on this channel here, so I really don't want to keep repeating myself with the same authors. So if you want a really in-depth talk about him, you could always watch my short story, The Telltale Heart, or any other stories that I may have published that has Edgar Allan Poe in them. But in case this is your first time on my channel, I'm just going to give you a very quick overview about him. So Edgar Allan Poe was born on January 19th, 1809, and he died on October 7th, 1849. He was an American writer, poet, editor, and literary critic who is best known for his poetry and short stories, particularly his tales of mystery and the macabre. He is widely regarded as the central figure of Romanticism in the United States and of American literature. He was one of the country's earliest practitioners of the short story, and he's considered the inventor of the detective fiction genre, as well as a significant contributor to the emerging genre of science fiction at the time. He is the first well-known American writer to earn a living through writing alone, resulting in a financially difficult life and career. Like I said before, if you want to know a little more about Edgar Allan Poe, you can read any of my other stories, or listen to, I suppose, any of my other stories like The Telltale Heart, and I do have plenty more, so just go ahead and listen to that. But yeah, without further ado, let's get on with the story. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment down below which short story you would like to read next. The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. Fortunato had hurt me 1,000 times, and I had suffered quietly. But then I learned that he had laughed at my proud name, Montresor, the name of an old and honored family. I promised myself that I would make him pay for this, that I would have revenge. You must not suppose, however, that I spoke of this to anyone. I would make him pay, yes, but I would act only with the greatest care. I must not suffer as a result of taking my revenge. A wrong is not made right in that manner. And also the wrong, who would not be made right unless Fortunato knew he was paying and knew who was forcing him to pay. I gave Fortunato no cause to doubt me. I continued to smile in his face, and he did not understand that I was now smiling at the thought of what I had planned for him, at the thought of my revenge. Fortunato was a strong man, a man to be feared, but he had one great weakness. He liked to drink good wine, and indeed he drank much of it. So he knew a lot about fine wines and proudly believed that he was a trained judge of them. I knew, too, old wines well, and I bought the best I could find, and wine, I thought, wine would give me my revenge. It was almost dark one evening in the spring, when I met Fortunato in the street alone. He spoke to me more warmly than was usual, for he had already drunk more wine than was good for him. I acted pleased to see him, and I shook his hand as if he had been one of my closest friends. Fortunato, how are you? Montresor, good evening, my friend. My dear Fortunato, I am indeed glad that I have met you. I was just thinking of you, for I have been tasting my new wine. I bought a full cask of fine wine, which they tell me is Amontillado. But Amontillado? Quite impossible. I know, it doesn't seem possible. I could not find you. I was just going to ask Lucrece. If anyone understands wines, it's Lucrece. He will tell me. Lucrece? He does not know one wine from another. But they say he knows as much as wines about as you know. Ho, come, let's go. Go where? To your vaults, to taste the wine. No, my friend, no. I can see you are not well, and the vaults are cold and wet. I do not care. Let us go. I'm well enough. The cold is nothing, Amontillado. Someone is playing games with you. And Lucrece, Lucrece knows nothing about wines, nothing at all. As he spoke, Fortunato took my arm, and I allowed him to hurry me to my great stone palace where my family, the Montresors, had lived for centuries. There was no one at home. I had told the servants that they must not leave the palace, as I would not return until the following morning, and they must care for the place. This, I knew, was enough to make it certain that they would all leave as soon as my back was turned. I took down from their places on the wall 2 brightly burning lights. I gave one of these to Fortunato and led him to a wide doorway. There we could see the stone steps going into the darkness. Asking him to be careful as he followed, I went down before him, down under the ground, deep under the old walls of my palace. We came finally to the bottom of the steps and stood there a moment together. The earth which formed the floor was cold and hard. We were there, entering the last resting place of the dead, of the Montresor family. Here, too, we kept our finest wines, here in the cool, dark, still air under the ground. Fortunato's step was not sure, because of the wine he had been drinking. He looked uncertainly around him, trying to see through the thick darkness which pushed in around us. Here our brightly burning lights seemed weak indeed, but our eyes soon became used to the darkness. We could see the bones of the dead lying in large piles along the walls, and the stones of the walls were wet and cold. From the long rows of bottles which were lying on the floor among the bones, I chose one which contained a very good wine. Since I had nothing to open the bottle with, I struck the stone wall with it and broke off the small end. I offered the bottle to Fortunato. Here, Fortunato, drink some of this fine Medoc. It will help keep us warm. Drink. Thank you, my friend. I drink to the dead who lie sleeping around us. And I, Fortunato, drink to your long life. Ah, a very fine wine indeed. But the Amontillado. It is farther along. Come. We walked on for some time. We were now underneath the river's bed, and water fell in drops upon us from above. Deeper into the ground we went, past still more bones. Your vaults are many and large. There seems to be no end to them. We are a great family, and an old one. It is not far now, but I can see you trembling with the cold. Come, let us go back in before it's too late. It's nothing. Let us go on. But first, another drink of your Medoc. I took up among from the bones another bottle. It was another wine of fine quality, a de Grave. Again I broke off the neck of the bottle. Fortunato took it and drank it all without stopping for a breath. He laughed and threw the empty bottle over his shoulder. We went on deeper and deeper into the earth. Finally we arrived at a vault in which the air was so old and heavy that our lights almost died. Against the 3 of the walls there were piles of bones higher than our heads. From the 4th wall someone had pulled down all the bones, and they were spread all around us on the ground. In the middle of the wall was an opening into the vault, if I can call it that, a little room about 3 feet wide, 6 or 7 feet high, and perhaps 4 feet deep. It was hardly more than a hole in the wall. Go on, I said. Go in. The Amontillado is in there. Fortunato continued to go forward, uncertainly. I followed him immediately. Soon, of course, he reached the back wall. I stood there a moment, facing the wall, surprised and wondering. In that wall were 2 heavy iron rings. A short chain was hanging from one of these, and a lock from the other. Before Fortunato could guess what was happening, I closed the door and chained him tightly to the wall. I stepped back. Fortunato, I said, put your hands against the wall. You must feel how the water runs over it. Once more I ask you, please, will you not go back? No? If not, I must leave you. But first, I must do everything I can for you. But the Amontillado. Ah, yes, indeed, the Amontillado. As I spoke these words, I began to search among the bones. Throwing them to one side, I found the stones which earlier I had taken down from the wall. Quickly, I began to build the wall again, covering the hole where Fortunato stood, trembling. Montresor, what are you doing? I continued working. I could hear him pulling at the chain, shaking it wildly. Only a few stones remained put in their place. Montresor, this is a very good joke indeed. Many times we will laugh about it, as we drink our wine together. Of course, as we drink the Amontillado. But is it not late? Should we not be going back? They will be expecting us. Let us go. Yes, let us go. As I said this, I lifted the last stone from the ground. Montresor, for the love of God. Yes, for the love of God. I heard no answer. Fortunato! I cried, Fortunato! I heard only a soft, low sound, a half-cry of fear. My heart grew sick. It must have been the cold. I hurried to force the last stone into its position, and I put the old bones again in a pile against the wall. For half a century now, no human hand has touched them. May he rest in peace. The end. Alright, so that was the Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. Like always, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the story, and then we're going to jump straight into the analysis. So in the story, what really happens is just that there's this guy named Montresor who's been, according to him at least, like, irreparably insulted by his acquaintance Fortunato, and now he seeks revenge. So he decides to trick Fortunato into coming into his vault, his wine cellar, or at least, and, like, kind of trap him in there. Now, Fortunato, he's, like, very obviously drunk, so, like, Montresor's trying to take advantage of that. And so as they're walking through the wine cellar, it's, like, very cold, and so Montresor is, like, giving Fortunato more and more alcohol to make him, like, warmer. And so they're just walking through his, like, family's dead bones and wine cellar, which I thought was so weird. I was like, why would you, like, first of all, you're just kind of throwing these bones everywhere. At least that's how it seemed like to me. He was just saying there were piles of bones. And then you're, like, you decide that, oh, yeah, I'm going to put my wine here as well. So it's just, like, a family mausoleum, or, like, a family morgue. And at the same time, there's also just, like, your wine cellar, which seems like a multi-purpose room, I guess. I thought that was so strange. But, continuing on, so this, like, room is very cold, it's very damp because it's underneath a river, and it's covered in nitrite and saltpeter and, like, this whitish kind of mineral, and it's just, like, very, creepy. Also, another thing I did not realize until I recorded this story, like, way longer. I recorded this story some time ago, and something I did not even realize was that the source that I got this from, even though it is from it is from the U.S. Department of State, and so I don't understand why, but I always, whenever I read out loud things, I always use a PDF, but I'm just reading them for, like, my own kind of fun. I use websites normally. I don't really care. So something I did not notice until I was rereading the story, so I could, like, give you a proper analysis, was that the PDF, like, missed a lot of things. I don't know. It skipped a lot of things. It didn't skip a lot. There were 3 things that I noticed it skipped. I don't even know what it might have skipped. So if you have read the story before and you notice something was off, please comment down below, and I can just send them, like, a quick email or something, because I was very confused. So I will go over those 3 things that they missed. First of all, actually there are 4 things, because one thing that's kind of important is that what happens is, as Fortunato enters the vault, or the area, the underground area, he's kind of, like, looking through, he notices some pipes. He kind of gets, as they enter the catacombs, he first of all has this, like, very he is coughing a lot, and it seems that he has a cough because of the cold, and he's, like, coughing a lot. Apparently he was coughing straight for, like, many minutes, but at the end he's like, it's nothing. Another thing that I noticed was, it's not as important, but there's, like, white webwork which gleams from the cavern walls, and those are because of nitrate. And then another slightly important thing that happens, or that at least we missed, is, this is actually quite important, it's when Fortunato is like, oh, I completely forgot what your family's, like, drink of arms were, and what the motto was. And so the arms is this huge human foot drawer in a field azure, and the foot crushes a serpent rampant whose fangs are embedded in the heel. And then the motto is Nemo me impune lassist, which basically just means, and this is kind of like foreshadowing, and it means no one attacks me with impunity. So that's kind of all I can tell was skipped over in the story, but yeah, I apologize for that. Now, there's a lot of terror prevalent in this story, as in many Poe's tales. It results in the lack of evidence that accompanies Montresor's claims to Fortunato's thousands injuries and insult. The story features revenge and secret murder as a way to avoid using legal channels for retribution. Law is nowhere on Montresor's or Poe's radar screen, and the enduring horror of the story is the fact of punishment without proof. Montresor uses his subjective experience of Fortunato's insult to name himself judge, jury, and executioner in this tale, which also makes him an unreliable narrator. Montresor confesses this story 50 years later after its occurrence. Such a significant passage of time between the events and the narration of the events makes the narrative all the more unreliable. Montresor's unreliability overrides the rational consideration of evidence, such as the particular occurrences of insult that would necessarily precede any kind of guilty sentence in a non-Poe world. The Cask of Amontillado takes subjective interpretation, the fact that different people interpret the same things differently, to its horrific endpoint. But there's also a lot of foreshadowing in the story. I don't even think I could go over all of it, but for example, Montresor's face is covered in this black silk mask to kind of represent not blind justice, but rather its gothic opposite, which is biased revenge. And in contrast, Fortunato is donning this motley colored costume of the court fool who gets literally and tragically fooled by Montresor's masked motives. The color schemes here kind of represent the irony of Fortunato's death sentence, as well as Fortunato, being Italian for the fortunate one, faces the realization that even the carnival season can be murderously serious. Montresor chooses the setting of the carnival for its abandonment of social order, and while the carnival usually indicates joyful social interaction, Montresor distorts its merry abandon, turning the carnival on its head. The final moments of conversation between Montresor and Fortunato heighten the horror and suggest that Fortunato ultimately and ironically achieves some upper hand over Montresor, because he pleads at the very end, "For the love of God, Montresor," and that's kind of provoked some much critical controversy, because some critics suggest that Montresor has at last brought Fortunato to the pit of desperation and despair, indicating by his invocation of a god that has long left him behind. And other critics, however, argue that Fortunato ultimately mocks the love of God, thereby employing the same irony that Montresor has effectively used to lure him into the crypts. These are Fortunato's final words, and the strange desperation that Montresor demonstrates in the response suggests that he needs Fortunato more than he wants to admit. Only when he twice screams Fortunato loudly with no response does Montresor really claim to have some sort of sick heart. And the reasons for Fortunato's silence are unclear, but perhaps his willing refusal to answer Montresor is a type of strange victory in otherwise dire circumstances. Anyway, that is it for today. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and please comment down below which short story you would like to read next. That way I can read stories that you guys actually want to hear.